What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Ableton Music Producer Podcast. This is Dan Giffen. I'm really excited for this new series that we are starting with Ableton Certified Trainers. So the next 4 episodes coming over the next few weeks are going to be with some of the OGs, the legends, if you will, of Ableton Certified Trainers. And I had some help from Ableton themselves picking some of these certified trainers. So very, very excited to share all the good content that is coming your way. Today we are talking on the topic of mixing and mastering. And we have 2 amazing guests joining us, Brian Jackson and Mike Cupino, who are Ableton Certified Trainers, obviously. Brian Jackson is a music producer, electronic musician, audio engineer, educator. He is the author of the Music Producer Survival Guide, 4-part Ableton Live Beginners course on Skillshare. He has over 20 years of teaching experience. His students range from beginners to Grammy winners. He is one of the first 5 Ableton Certified Trainers on planet Earth. He's taught at many schools, including Manhattan, including SAE, IAR. He was the Electronic Music Program Coordinator at SAE and the Curriculum Director at Dubspot, which is crazy because I actually went there in New York City back in 2013. So it's pretty wild how things come full circle. Also joining us is Mike Cupino. He also worked at SAE, was involved in web design, video editing, composition, print work. He also developed curriculum for SAE Institute in Miami for their electronic music production course. Mike has also done some UX design and sound design with the company Mixed in Key. He does a lot of freelance engineering. He's worked with many artists and many studios in the music production world, and I'm super stoked to have him here as well. Make sure you check out their links in the show notes if you want to stay connected, follow them, learn from them. They have a lot of information that they share with us today. It's good stuff on mixing and mastering. Before we dive in today, I want to give you a heads up on a couple quick things. Number 1, shout out to our sponsors Melodics for supporting this episode. They make that really awesome desktop app I keep talking about where you can step up your skills producing in the studio and practicing. They gamify the art of practicing, so you can plug in almost any MIDI controller or your electronic drum set and step up your skills that way practicing. It's like a way better Guitar Hero for professionals. Use the discount code LPO-20 to save 20% on their annual subscription. And they also have a free trial, so don't sleep on that as well. Also, for this Ableton Certified Trainer series, Ableton was kind enough to offer 20% off anything and everything on ableton.com, and it expires September 30th, 2021. So take advantage of that while you can. The discount code is LPO20. That's LPO20. Use that discount code, save some money, go to ableton.com, buy some packs, purchase Ableton Live, whatever you want. Also, big thanks in advance for hitting that subscribe button for the podcast. If you want to be the first to know when new episodes come out, subscribe to the newsletter. I'll also send you some other good content and stuff. So go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter, and happy to send you some goodies in your email inbox. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the episode. Big thanks to Ableton and Brian and Mike for making this episode possible. And without wasting any more time, let's jump right in. Thanks again for joining the podcast, guys. You guys have done some really awesome work. It's always a privilege to hang out with other certified trainers in the Ableton family. So, yeah, I'm glad to have you guys here.
Man, thanks. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. I just kind of figured we'd go back and forth and just jump around and jump through all these different talking points as far as mixing tips. And before we jump into all the good stuff, I'd love just for people listening who don't know anything about you guys, just to introduce yourself, maybe talk about some projects you've worked on, where you live, what kind of music you're into, how did you get into Ableton? If you just want to fire away, maybe Brian, we could start with you if that's cool.
Sure. Yeah. Brian Jackson, Brooklyn, New York. I started out playing in weirdo bands, electronic kind of math rock stuff in the 90s, and then got full into electronic stuff in the early 2000s. And then I needed something to perform with on stage, and live was pretty new at the time. And that's why I jumped into live, early 2000s, and became certified trainer in 2008. So I was part of the first group of people here. They did the first event in New York. I do nowadays, I'm focused on writing hybrid, electronic, orchestral, acoustic, kind of sci-fi tension action stuff for music production libraries. So I've kind of left the space of trying to do music for albums and put out to fans, and a little more of anonymous kind of work in some ways, but it's kind of freed up a lot of creative options, which is pretty cool. So that's really been the focus last few months, kind of full time trying to do that right now.
Awesome. Yeah, we were just talking earlier before we hit record that you developed some curriculum for Dubspot way back in the day. And that's actually where I learned Ableton Live. So it's a freaking small world, man, coming back full circle.
Yeah. It's the electronic music is international, but it's the different scenes seem to be pretty small.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, totally. Cool, man. Thanks for sharing. Mike, maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, Mike Cupino, Miami. My Ableton journey is going to sound eerily similar to Brian's. Got into playing. I was a drummer originally, playing music in the 90s. Got into Ableton in the early 2000s, and kind of got into it from there. From once I got into electronic music and stuff like that. I've been down here in Miami. Doing teaching Ableton, working for different artists, stuff like that. Also, since I've been down here, I've managed to fall backwards into software development a little bit. If you guys are familiar with some of the mixed in key products, I do sound design and UX for mixed in key down here. So if any of you guys have used, I know we did some stuff with some of the trainers with the Captain plugins and stuff like that. So I did a lot of the sound design for that and a good chunk of the UX and stuff like that with kind of how that all works. So, and a lot of that has been through Ableton. So a lot of it has been through me getting the certification. I got my certification in, I think, the same year as Brian, 2008. Actually, I did mine at Dubspot. I think I actually met Brian there when I did my certification there. I think he came by Dubspot and said some things for something like that.
Yeah, that was the second one, and then a bunch of us came by and said hi. It was right there.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah. There was three other Dubspot instructors there. There was Mike Hatzis, Kiva. Do you know DJ Kiva?
Kiva was my Ableton instructor.
Yeah, he's actually here now.
No way.
Yeah, he's here in Miami. We sometimes, there's a couple of spots I've taught at, and I've had Kiva come in and sub for me and stuff like that. So,
dude, small world.
Yeah.
I love Kiva. He's the man.
Yeah. So Kiva and Chris Petty were in my class and my certification team. So
cool. Loudon Stearns was too.
Yes, Loudon was too. Yes, that's right. Loudon Stearns was in that one too. Yeah. So it was. I was pretty nervous. There was a lot of really smart guys in that that class. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty nervous hanging around all those really smart dudes.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the thing though. There's always something new to learn. Like just when I think I get a lot smarter, there's like a new update or something new that comes out, just something else to go into the rabbit hole of Ableton Live.
Oh yeah, man. I think that's the appeal of what got me into like this whole thing. Because I was in the, kind of the classical music world, and that's like really boring. It's not boring, but it's been basically, it's the same thing for, I don't know, better part of 100 years or more, So
yeah.
That was the thing, like electronic music, it was so new. It was, especially in the early 2000s, it was like rapidly evolving. Reason, stuff like that. My first program I got was Rebirth. It was just like crazy. I was like, this is wild. This is so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, man, that's a good story. Thanks for sharing. Mixed in Keys, great company. I've done some work with them and some webinars and things, Ableton Live as well. So shout out to them. A great company. Yeah, I didn't know that about you. So that's dope. That's dope.
Yeah, if you sometimes too, man, I don't know if you've gotten spammed with some of our advertisings for like the mixed for the Captain chord stuff, but I do a good chunk of the VO work for mixed in keys too as well. So
cool.
So you may have maybe heard my voice on a few advertisements too as well.
Yeah, probably. I probably didn't read this. Everything's coming full circle, man. Thanks again for joining the podcast. Today, it's going to be pretty chill, open format, but I figured we kind of go round robin and each of us just share a couple mixing problems that we commonly see with students and others. We've got a bunch of different topics. Obviously, mixing and mastering is a super deep topic. There's a billion ways we could go. But I figured if we just go through a couple of these questions and topics that I've been getting regularly from students and other people, love to pick your brains and just hear the feedback you guys have to share. So first off, maybe Brian, let's start with you again. What are some common mixing problems that you've seen either with students or just as you've been learning and growing over the years? And what are some ways that you've overcome some of those common problems you see in the mixing world?
Especially for people that are like just kind of getting into learning how to mix. And maybe know a little bit. I noticed there's like no really understanding of like fundamental concepts, and the whole focus is on plugins and using EQs and compressors and sidechain tricks, and they really have no idea like what the difference is between, say, using an EQ when you're doing sound design, using EQ when you're mixing. So I often have to like strip away everything people think they know when I'm teaching them how to mix and just start from scratch and really just like rebuild the whole concepts for them, that it's really about like a goal. It's not about a process, and using reference tracks and then how to use reference tracks, because that can be tricky. So I would say the biggest things are people really not understanding like what mixing is, like what the goal of it is in actuality, as opposed to what they think it is.
Yeah, definitely. Referencing is a big one for me too. Like it's like just retuning your ears. That's something that I feel like I didn't start doing until a long time after I started producing music.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, totally. Mike, anything you want to add or thoughts you have?
Yeah, well, just kind of touching on what Brian said a little bit about some of the fundamentals. One fundamental thing that I find that like is really overlooked a lot, and it's like a simple thing that can save people like a massive amount of time before you ever even like touch a compressor and EQ. And it's one of those fundamental concepts, phase, checking for phase for things, especially for your low end, or if you got multiple mics or anything like that. You should I can't tell you how many times I used to, like, when I was young, I'd try to EQ things and then I'd be like, oh my God, did I check for phase? And then I would check for phase. And then everything that I did like the past 2 hours was just like totally just like blown out of the water, was like totally useless. Once I realized things are out of phase, I was like, oh crap. I was like, man. Yeah. So yeah. And a lot of the problems sometimes fix themselves, and it's just like a more clear picture as far as what's supposed to be happening, and that's one of those fundamental things that a lot of people just kind of don't understand. Something that, I don't know, unless maybe you've, I don't know, done a lot of fundamentals, there's not a lot of topics on phase, I guess, on the internet or something.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Definitely. What are some tools that maybe you've used to fix like phasing issues that you really like?
I have one of my favorite, man. I'm heavy in kind of the UAD world, but there's a UAD plugin from a company called Little Labs. It's called the Phase Alignment Tool. One of the things that's really interesting about it, because I always thought, at least my understanding of phase is, things are either like in or 100 degrees out of phase, 180 degrees out of phase rather. But this plugin can actually sweep between phase, like between that. So you could have something theoretically like 36 degrees out of phase, which is really, really pretty interesting. And you can really find, and that's another like kind of side tip, especially for any of the ones who are listening who do a lot of like trap music. If you're doing kicks and 808s, phase is like really, really important for managing that low end.
Yeah.
Another cool one is if you have the Eventide anthology bundle, there is a time alignment tool in there which can shift things by samples. But the other cool thing too, because I do a bit of live recording too, is it also will calculate distance. So if you have like a room mic, you can calculate you can basically measure the distance to the room mic, put in that distance, and it'll compensate that phase for you.
A lot easier than using a calculator.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. How many feet per second does sound travel?
Yeah, it's 0.88 milliseconds per feet at sea level at a certain temperature. I don't want to be dumb. I'm trying to be creative. I don't want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Brian, any tools that you use for phase or even referencing that you mentioned earlier, talking about common mixing problems?
Sure. The phase stuff, especially if you're doing with multi-mic setups, that's like a whole different world. And a lot of that is just, learning how to record well, which is a whole different kind of discussion. For mixing, I tend to not focus on it too much unless I hear something doesn't sound right. If I solo something and it sounds good, and then I bring things back in and something loses some sort of impact or clarity, then I'll look at some of that. But I'll often just use, depending what the situation is. Sometimes I'll just nudge like audio files around. Sometimes I'll use the track delay compensation. And
track delay compensation is great too.
And then I will use just like a regular delay sometimes and set it to like 0 feedback and just set it to, depending which DAW I'm in. You can set some to milliseconds, some to samples, and kind of use some of that by ear. But for the kind of stuff I tend to work on, I don't tend to get too OCD about phase stuff, but I understand its importance. And, now that we're talking, is like, maybe I should pay a little more attention, but especially on low end stuff, like there's a lot of weird things when you start, filtering the low end out, things can happen. So, but what was that? What was the rest of the question? Like other,
just mixing tips. We talked about referencing as well. I didn't know if you.
Oh yeah. So the thing with references, like, to really make the best of them, you really have to understand like what happens at each stage of the process, like what happens during production and recording, what happens during mix down, and then what happens during mastering. And once you understand all that, then it's a lot easier to use reference tracks. Because if you're referencing a professionally done thing that's like really well mixed and mastered, and you're listening to your unmixed project, you have to know like what you're going for with that or not. And the most obvious thing usually is like how loud things are, how pushed things are, how much saturation has been added, how much compression's been added. So once you can hear those things, using references a lot easier. But for students that are learning how to use references, or anybody that's learning how to do that stuff, is like you kind of have to take a few steps back and go for general characteristics and not the total overall like punch or polish or atmosphere until you're close to finishing your mix. And then you just have to pay attention to balance and how much things cut through and not how loud things are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's definitely an art form to learning how to use reference tracks.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
And there's times where I get lost in a mix or a mastering, or I'm not exactly sure if it's doing what I want. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I have a tool to help me with this. I can find some references. So I've gotten really lazy about using references, but I will try to pull them up.
Yeah. When I first started using reference tracks before I had like a lot of experience with mixing, I feel like I needed a lot of Prozac during my sessions because it was just like really depressing. It was like, what am I doing? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm writing now, I have to listen to all these reference tracks before I even start writing.
Yeah.
And especially when it's this like A-list, amazing musicians, top level productions. And I'm like, man, this stuff is so good. Maybe I shouldn't be referencing these right now. But then at the same time, they're inspiring. So it's like, oh, I want to try to get to this point with my compositions in terms of production and writing and all of it. So yeah, I mean, it can be discouraging when you're listening to something that's amazing and you're like struggling to get through to make it where you feel it's good.
Yeah.
But I think it happens to everybody. So it's just part of creative process.
Definitely. I'd say 2 quick things I'd like to add to that, as well as everything else. We'll move on real fast, but using utility has been great for phase for me, just for like a quick fix, not nearly as detailed as the Eventide plugins you were talking about, Mike, and some of these other tools, but as a quick fix, that's been helpful for me because I'm a drummer and I have a lot of mic placement phase things that can happen. So that's always been helpful for me. Anybody listening that's maybe newer to live. And I forget what else I was going to say. So let's just move on.
Utility plugin, I use it all the time for stuff, especially the once they updated it in Live 10. I use that
the bass mono. The bass mono is great, and it's got mid side now too. So
proper stereo with controls, all that. Yeah, I use that thing on like almost every track.
Yep.
During a mix, ends up with that on there for volume automation or stereo width control. Mm-hmm. It's something.
Definitely. Cool. Well, Mike, maybe let's start with you. If you were starting your mixing process on a track, say somebody gives you stems, what does your typical workflow look like? If you can explain in say like 5 minutes or less, what's your process as far as mixing a track?
Well, I mean, first kind of to what, Brian's talking about referencing, that's also something if you're doing client work, that can save you a lot of headache in terms of what you're doing. Sometimes the client has an idea of the way things are, and when you sit and listen to it, it may be a different picture to you of how things turn out. So one of the first things that I always try to get at least on the same page, at least with my client, as far as what they expect to hear from the mix. So in a great tool for that is references. So I usually try to ask them at least for a couple of tunes that, if your mix could, if this could turn out to sound like anything, give me a couple of those tracks, So that helps me kind of get on the same page as them. Because otherwise I could just go off in the wrong direction. But so obviously once I get everything into the computer, a lot of organization. I like to, obviously, first things first, always get organized. I find I always use, especially for some of the younger guys out there, find like an organization system for yourself and always use that. Like for me, I always have my drums at the top of the session. I always have a kick, snare, hat. And then after that, I have my bass, then keys, then leads and or vocals. So it doesn't matter if I have 200 tracks in my session. I kind of know roughly where everything is always. I never have to really look too hard for anything. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but just find a way that works for you and always kind of organize that way and just kind of go through that. So a lot of organizations, and depending on, I usually also now in 11, this is great now because 11, you have proper templates. So now, which is really, really cool in 11, I have a few mixed templates that, depending on what I'm doing, I'll probably load because generally I use a lot of sends. I have a couple of templates where literally I have every send set up because, like when do you not going to use like a quarter note, half note delay, an eighth note delay, a medium reverb and like a long reverb, I think we probably use all of those on every track at some point. So I have a couple of templates with all that stuff set up. And another thing that I found really useful in terms of working, because I'm not really a musician so much these days, but I took over that kind of, as a drummer, you put everything where you can basically put your drum set with your eyes closed. Everything's like right where you need it. And that's something that I find really useful in terms of mixing and working. I have my plugins organized where I can find everything really quickly. And another thing is I've created my own remote script for controlling my plugins, and in particular my sends is what I was talking about. So I always have the same sends with the same effects on them. So I always know send A is a medium, send C is is my plate, send 5 is my eighth note, quarter note, and all my delays. So when I'm mixing and I'm doing stuff, I don't even have to think about like, ooh, let me load this up. I just always kind of know where they are. And I can almost mix like someone would play an instrument, where everything's kind of almost muscle memory and you don't have to like really think about it too much.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely.
So kind of that's kind of like my workflow as far as getting all that stuff in. And then kind of depending on what the track needs, I usually start with the drums. A really good friend of mine down here is a great mix engineer. I worked at SAE with him. His name's Frank Socorro. I heard him say that, and I thought this was a great tip. He's like, he starts with the drums and vocals a lot because he does a lot of hip hop and pop. And he said he gets it sounding like a record with just the drums and vocals and then fills everything in. And I thought that was I was like, oh, that's really pretty interesting. Because, I would sometimes have battles with the vocals and the key instruments and stuff like that. But I was like, man, that's pretty cool. Get the drums and vocals. That's what everyone kind of listens to. So a lot of times I kind of start with drums, do a little bit of the vocals, depending on if there needs some tuning, all that kind of stuff, and then kind of fill everything else in behind it.
Yeah. No, I have a very similar process. Yeah, definitely. Depending on the kind of music you mix, it could be very different for a lot of people. But yeah, I'm a drummer, so I usually always mix my drums first too, and then the leads. But yeah, Brian, maybe share some of your workflows with mixing as far as
sure.
Yeah.
So very similar. I always start out by making sure everything's really well organized, cleaning things up. I often will have people that I mix for, which has been a few years. I've been doing a lot of mixing for people for the last bunch of years. I moved into mainly mastering for other artists. But I would often have them send me their whole session if we had the same DAW. So if it was Pro Tools, Live, or Logic, I could accept the whole projects. And sometimes I found that useful, especially if they're using a lot of synths. It's easier to go in and tweak an envelope in the synth than to try to do other stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd have people send me every track, which I don't like to call stems because I think of a stem as like a subgroup.
Yeah.
And stem means stereo mix, which I found out recently is where that term originated. So the individual tracks.
Oh, really? Actually,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was something, I forget what it was. It was some like really well-known audio engineer a few months ago or a few weeks ago posted a thing like, please stop calling these things this. It's confusing. The term came from, I was like, oh, that's why it's called that. I always thought it was like, anyways, I always thought it was from like an audio post-production where it was like the stems of a 5.1 mix or something. But anyways, if they have rendered everything out or bounced everything out for me, that makes it easier in some cases too. But I found there's pros and cons of all that. So I can always have them freeze something if I don't have those. And that's a whole elaborate process that'd be worth talking about at some point.
Yeah.
Like the minutia of that stuff. But always organize everything first. Have an idea like what the goal of it's going to be. So like, do I have reference tracks? Is it like make this sound good in this genre? And then I always do like a quick rough mix and then just like close the DAW and just pull out a notebook and just like take notes. And then from there, I kind of usually plan out what I want to do. And most of the time I work on instrumental music. So I always start with the rhythm section. I always start with the bass, drums and the bass. If there's vocals, then I'll move on to vocals after the drums and bass. Because usually that's going to be the most important thing. So I like to have the rhythm section sounding good and then move on to vocals. But like I said, like 90% of the stuff I do is all the stuff I do is instrumental. And most of the stuff I've mixed for people is instrumental. Mastering, I've done a lot of vocal-oriented mastering stuff. So yeah, I just try to get the everything sounding solid in the rhythm section. And then from there, I kind of move on to what I deem in my plan to be the most important elements. So whatever it is, it could be the bass, it could be a synth sound, it could be sound design stuff. And then I get that working really well, which is the same idea going to the vocals next, because that would be the most important element. And then I work everything around that. And I do a lot of revisions. I like to get away from stuff. So I like to get somewhere where I'm kind of happy with it, bounce it out, listen to it where I'm not looking at the screen, take my notebook out, write notes, and then go back to it.
Yeah.
For myself, it's a lot easier than if I'm doing it for a client where there's like a specific deadline or, I have 12 tracks to get through, 12 songs to get through. I might not do as many revisions. I'll do solid rough mix, depending on how much familiarity there is with who it is. I might send it to them, but someone I don't know well, I never send them a rough mix. I try to get it somewhere really solid. Then I send it to them for feedback. Yeah. And only one time has that ever blown up in my face. Every other time, it's like I let them know, like I just want to see if this is the right direction.
Yeah.
And then I get some feedback from some notes from them. But I would say I haven't mixed a track for somebody in 6 years, other than myself. I've done a lot of mastering in that time. So
yeah,
which is like I actually much prefer for other people. Like if it's for other people, I'd rather master their album than mix it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
But I have had a few times. I've probably done a track here or there for a friend or something. Mix wise, other than my own stuff, which now I'm really focused on doing my own mixing.
Cool.
I mean, I end up mixing. I kind of same thing. I really don't have straight mixing work. I do mix most of the stuff I do produce for other people. So there's that. So so rarely is it just straight mixing.
There's that blurry line, I think, between like post mixing and stem mastering. It's just kind of like, no, definitely. I think I enjoy mastering more than I do mixing as well, just because it's that final little polish before it goes out into the world. So you're like the last person to get your fingers on it. So yeah, maybe
plus there's just so much more like so much more you got to work with people when mixing, especially,
And especially when you hear the same song over and over as an artist from the artist side, because they get like affectionately attached to how they hear it because they've heard it 6 billion times.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. People falling in love with the production mix, and then like that's the worst, man.
Yeah, and it could be a lot better after you touched it, but maybe they've just tuned their ears to what they've heard so long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, struggles can be real. Cool. No, that's great insight. Thanks for sharing, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Let's jump ahead and talk about maybe some of your favorite Ableton Live devices for mixing. Brian, do you want to start with that?
Yeah. So I do use a lot of third-party stuff, but I do use Ableton's. I use EQ8 a lot, especially if I'm doing subtractive stuff, if I'm not boosting. And Saturator gets a good amount of use. The Glue gets a good amount of use. And the not the reverb, but I used convolution reverb a lot. And now I use hybrid reverb quite a bit. I'm really liking the hybrid reverb in Live 11.
Me too.
So I would say of their built-in stuff, that would be, I use utility all the time because I only do automation on the actual volume slider as like final tweaks. I use the utility for almost all my volume automation. So that way I use it backwards. A lot of people use these things backwards. They're intended to trim a track that has a bunch of automation on it. But it's like, I just want to be able to look at my whole mix and move faders around. If I want to rebalance things, I don't want to have to go in and do a bunch of automation or mess about a bunch of automation. Yeah. So I try to leave my faders free until like the last thing, like a little fade out at the end of the track or something like that. So I use utility. I might use that more than any other like Ableton device during mixing because I use so many third-party plugins. But yeah, ones I mentioned, I do use quite a bit.
Awesome.
And then the creative stuff's a little different. I use the creative effects, from time to time. I do like a lot of the creative effects in live.
Yeah.
I will say, man, now that they have like the automation transformation and stuff now, it is a lot easier. It used to be such a mess if you had to like remove all your automation that you had in older versions of Ableton. And it used to be really crazy to do all that stuff. But now the transformation makes that a lot easier. But I would still do the same thing as you, Ryan.
The link track editing, I wish it included automation on the volume or the pan.
Yes,
you can link the stuff for editing, but
yes,
I don't know. Anyway, it's it's nice to have, so
yeah, maybe the next 11 update.
Yeah, at least they got comping, man. That was really real way too long,
Yeah,
that's great. It's really good though, man. It's really good.
It is. Yeah.
I mean, Live's not my first pick for mixing, but it's my first pick for like everything else. Yeah. For almost everything else, for anything kind of like music production related that's not like sync to picture. So, I'll stay in live and mix in live unless it's like got 100 tracks, and I'm not going to try to mix some crazy large thing in there. But
I always found it weird that live doesn't have like real mono tracks.
No, every track has 2 mono tracks.
Yeah, those are 2 mono tracks.
You get double the mono tracks.
More is better.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, Mike, anything else you want to add to as far as Ableton devices you use for mixing or mastering?
I went through this big like infatuation with saturation devices, and I have a ton of. But Ableton Saturator is like still really good, man. Yeah, man, it's held up. Like I think the other thing, man, that I'm finally glad because I hated, and they sound really, really great now, is all the chorus effects now. Chorus effects are so much better. I really like Echo. Echo is really, really amazing. I have a real Roland RE201, and like Echo makes me just as happy. I swear it does. Like it's really, really awesome, and it has everything. The pitch modulation, the ducking. I mean, it's really, really. I mean, it's like a $200 delay plugin. It really is.
That's my delay for the question down the road. If it's like which you can only have one of whatever, I actually picked Echo.
Yeah, Echo
I can only have one delay, and I had to pick one in the whole world.
I think so too, man. I think so too. I think so. I think I absolutely agree with that.
So there's a reverb built in. You can distort it, and you can go like over 100% on. I mean, it's really flexible.
Yeah. I was going to say that you just turn on D and drive the input, and it gets dirty.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Echo's fabulous. I use that a lot. Convolution reverb's great. The new phaser flanger is great. That's of course EQ8 is always really good too, man. I mean,
It's really
I mean, everyone. I think most of us use probably Pro Q3 at this point in time, but EQ8 still has its moments, man. It's still nice, and plus, just how it fits into the UI is nice too. So it's just
totally. Yeah. And the mid-side mode too is something I slept on for far too long. The mid-side
mode.
Yeah, and the EQ8.
Also, just auto. I should probably say auto filter. I probably use just as much as utility. Did they add this in 9? The different filter models. I think they added that.
It was 9.5 when they updated all that.
That was really huge, man. That's one of my favorite things to do too, man. If you just take a drum sample and you got like a kind of a flat drum sample, pick one of those models and just turn up the drive. It's just like instant flavor.
It's not even an auto filter the way most people use it. They just use it as a filter. You rarely use the auto parts of it.
Exactly. No, I don't. Yeah, exactly.
I do use the envelope input sometimes, in interesting ways. I'm not the LFO sweeping stuff. I rarely ever use.
Yeah, I don't know. I occasionally for like movement with like shakers and stuff. I'll do that because we're like dance, we're like house music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, auto filter. I use probably just about on every track.
I do use that quite a bit too.
Me too.
Max for Live wise, I think you also asked like, is there any favorite Max for Live things? There's this one that's been around forever. It's a freebie from maxforlive.com. It was a trio. It was called Solo Groupie. There was Solo Groupie, Mute Groupie, and Record Groupie. And it was a way to create solo groups and mute groups. I don't use the record and mute ones, but I use it for solo groups all the time. So you just drop it on each one, and there's like 16 number boxes, and you just click. So anything that's in group one, when you solo one, they all solo.
That's actually pretty cool.
It probably needs an update because it never was even 1.0. It was like a 0 version 0.36. It's like a decade old. It still works. A couple of things are getting a little funky in Live 11, but that's probably the only Max for Live one that's like a Convolution Reverb was technically Max for Live. Max for Live, but And then I found this thing a month ago. I'm still learning how to use it. Turns your push into a better arrangement view navigation controller. It's called Push to Arrange.
Really?
That one was like it's like $7 or something, maybe a few bucks less or more. Okay. And it does automatic bounce in place for you. You can key map stuff for that, and so that one I've been using a lot for just like navigating, zooming, push to -arrange.
Okay, yeah, I'm writing that down because we have a Max for Live episode coming up with other certified trainers. I'll have to check that out.
It's that Valium Drupal or something. It does a lot of cool Max for Live stuff. I think that's who it is.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. He's also on I don't know if you're in the Ableton forums and stuff like that.
I haven't been in a long time. I used to be in there all the time. It's been years since I've seen.
Yeah, he's in there. Well, he also because I also do like testing and stuff like that on a so he's quite active in that.
He's a clip gain a lot. He makes one called Clip Gain that's really cool. Yeah. That lets you get a little fader right above the clip.
Yeah, I found another one.
I use that quite a bit too.
Yeah, I found another one like I think it's called Audio Clip Tools, but it has another little floating window. It's on Max for Live, but this one's really cool because it even allows you to select multiple clips, and then you can adjust the gain of multiple clips across different tracks.
I need to check that out.
Yeah, it's really cool
all the time. Yeah.
Awesome.
I try to use the clip gain instead of automation whenever possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a nice mixing tool. Just even for vocals, just like a vocal thing, because vocals can be so erratic with volume. So it's just
want to over compress them. So go in and
absolutely just make a little bit of volume clip gains for them.
Yeah. Definitely. Have you guys ever played with Transient Machines?
Yes, Transient Machines. That's actually a really good transient designer. It's actually really from Surreal Machines. Yeah.
The Max for Live, like the thing that is like for sale in the packs.
Yeah, it's in the packs. Yeah.
So we have it. I'm sure.
Yeah. All the trainers got it. Man, it's actually really good. It's a multi-band. It's up to a 3-band transient designer.
I should check that out.
Yeah, it's actually really good. It's actually It's really good. It like kind of reshaped my idea of like how good audio tools could be in Max.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a transient designer sort of in the drum bus as well, but this takes it a little deeper, which is really nice. Yeah,
drum bus is a nice little gem in there too, man. Drum bus is really good, man. I have a lot of drum bus compressors, and drum bus is really it's up there, man. It holds its own with some of the really nice drum bus compressors.
Totally,
bus compressors I have.
Yeah, I've used it on a lot of piano. Surprisingly, it sounds really good. If like your piano is lacking some low mid range, just to give it some extra beef, I find that actually works pretty well.
So you guys familiar with the whole like OTT phenomenon?
Yeah,
of course.
So actually, this is funny because I don't use Serum, and I didn't realize that plugin that he gives away for free, the OTT. I didn't realize that it was based on a multi-band dynamics preset for Ableton Live.
Yeah, it is.
Because in the hybrid cinematic world, it's like it might even be more popular there than with like dubstep producers. Like people put it on, they use it on strings, on horns, like people making trailer music, because it makes all these orchestral libraries really pop and aggressive. And I've been watching all these tutorials on like making like hybrid cinematic stuff, and it's just like it's on there like everything. People are just like, oh, you just drop in some OTT.
Wow.
So actually I didn't use the multi-band dynamics almost ever. I just never really liked the interface for that.
Yeah, man. The interface.
Now I'm using it instead of using the free third-party plugin. I'm like, I'm using the real thing. I got the original right here. But I have to dial it back, man. It really is over the top.
It hits hard. It hits really hard. It's just a bunch of white fuzz in your face when you load it.
Totally. But I'm like low brass and like ostinato strings. I've been doing all that kind of stuff, mixing it with synths. And to get that stuff to cut through like all these synths, it really helps.
Oh, totally.
So anyway, I've actually been using multi-band dynamics for the first time ever, other than teaching it.
That's amazing. It's a whole new world. Funny. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I love OTT. It is kind of ugly though. I mean,
it was. I think it was a joke. Whoever made that preset, I think, was joking. Like when Live 8 came out or whatever. It's been in there forever. Like, let's do the most crazy thing, and then it just made sense on those crazy
sounds good like, though.
Decades old, like crazy in your face wobble basses. Everyone was like, "Oh, this makes my 12 layers of LFO basses stand out." Yeah, and now people are using it on like orchestral sounds.
Yeah,
that's so funny how it goes around. You would never imagine that would be used for something orchestral.
Yeah, I never would have guessed for that.
It's all over, man. It's everywhere now.
Yeah,
for all about like the hybrid stuff or anything that's like like meant to be like a little more modern, aggressive, in your face kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever heard of AS Console? Thomas Falds actually told me about this one. It's a Max for Live device, and it does a lot of analog modeling, but it's a Max for Live device, and it sounds amazing. It's one of the most expensive Max for Live devices I've seen. I think it's like $60 or $70. But it sounds great. It gives you pretty much every tool.
They would have had to write everything in C, because you can write your own objects, but in like C, like old school programming language. So that's where a lot of that stuff that sounds like amazing comes from, is somebody who's computer science or whatever is writing their objects from scratch in C. And then, or I think you can do stuff in Java too, but I don't know anyone's using Java anymore for that stuff. But yeah, I think that's where a lot of that stuff comes from, is people doing like hardcore coding and then making their own objects or using objects and then building the patchers from that.
Somebody really knew what they were doing with that AS console, because it's deep. It has a lot in it, but it sounds incredible. I've played with different tracks. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that used to be a thing. I mean, like, that was kind of always one of my things with Max, was like, I never thought it sounded that great. I mean, for like MIDI and all that stuff, it was really, really cool. But I was never like, when they made Max for Live, it definitely helped Max a lot in terms of sound quality. But that was kind of one of the things that I was like, never really. But yeah, it's definitely come a long way in recent years. There's definitely been some newer stuff that's come along. I'm like, man, that's actually wow.
Yeah. Like comping. Comping. Awesome. So if you could use only one compressor, one EQ, one delay, saturator, or reverb, what would they be? And this could be plugins or Ableton, either way.
Well, one compressor was the hardest one for me to figure out. on the list. But I realized Flux makes this one called Alchemist, which is a multi-band dynamics thing. It's kind of like the super high-end, high-fidelity version of the Ableton multi-band dynamics.
Do you use the Flux plugins a lot?
I use Alchemist all the time, but I mainly use it. I mainly use it in mastering, and I occasionally use it in the mix. But you can set it to single band mode, and it has all the models for all of their compressors in there. So if I had to pick one, I'd use that because I could kind of do anything with it.
That one's kind of
it has some transient stuff. It has some mid-side stuff on each band. Nothing like some of the more not like a Isotope or like Fat Filter in terms of the mid-side stuff. But you can do some basic stuff.
Yeah.
For an EQ, I would have to go with Pro Q3, Fat Filter Pro Q3.
Yep.
Just because you can do anything with it, and now it has the dynamic stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I've actually found myself using. Ableton Echo for my Echo. If I had to pick one delay, it would be that. Soundtoys Decapitator for a Saturator. And that was tricky one too, but I'd have to go with that. And then Altiverb by Audio Ease for reverb would be my only one, again, because it can do, can sound like whatever you make a impulse response does. And it has an amazing library of acoustic spaces and a bunch of gear. So I'd say those, I would be pretty happy. I could do a decent mix with just that stuff, I think.
Yeah, I hope you have a pretty strong computer, because if you load up a ton of Altiverbs, you might have an issue there.
Yeah, I have a 2018 Mac Mini, and I was able to load up, did a test, 64 of them without too much of a problem. With my buffer cranked. So, I'm not playing any MIDI notes at that point.
That's great. But, yeah. I'm using an older version of Altiverb. Maybe that was part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it was just a test. It wasn't actually running a session with tons of other, plugins.
Yeah. Okay. Stuff. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great plugin. Convolution reverb at its finest, really.
Yeah.
Awesome. Mike, how about you?
So one compressor, probably, man, I would probably go with my UAD Blueface 1176.
Yes.
I just know how that thing, I just know how to tune that thing into what I need just really, really fast, man. I just know that compressor so well.
Yeah.
And it sounds great. The Pro Q3, obviously, for EQ, although I will make a side note that I think there's a really strong competitor to Pro Q3. Have you guys seen UVI Shade?
No.
Really, really cool.
UBI or UVI?
UVI. The guys that make Falcon, stuff like that. They have, man, some of their plugins their audio plugins are quickly becoming my favorite. I think I fell in love with him too. You guys know who Dan Warhol is?
Yeah.
He does really awesome YouTube tutorials, about super crazy technical audio stuff.
Or it's just like an oscilloscope, you just see him talking.
Yeah, he does most of the Fab Filter videos, but he also does all the UVI videos. And he's great. So I think I fell in love with their stuff through him.
I just watched a crazy phase one he did last week.
Oh man, he's great. But UVI, their shade, it's like Pro Q3, but on steroids, because it's got LFOs, it's got all these multi-step sequencers. It's kind of I guess ever seen that the Amplesoft EQ where you can create a whole bunch of different harmonic bands and you can shift and move them. It's a really fascinating, a really fun EQ on a sound design level. You can get totally nuts with it. So check it out, UVI Shade. That's kind of quickly becoming, I use that one quite a bit.
Awesome.
Delays, Echo. I use Echo on everything. And Saturator, that is a little bit tough. Maybe either one of these. You guys ever messed around with the Vertigo sound stuff? The BSM.
I have the bus compressor, not the distortion one, not the saturation.
They have two. The Plugin Alliance has a VSM3, which is amazing. That thing is one of my favorite saturation devices. That thing is amazing. And then they have, through their own website, they have which is now the VSM4, which is really, really, really Really, really good. I put that on a lot of stuff too.
That's been on my list for a while to check out.
Yeah, those are amazing. And just on just another side note, because I feel bad if I leave them out because I use them all the time. Check out. Any guys ever messed around with Cush Audio stuff?
No,
I'm familiar with them, but I haven't used their stuff.
Also, check out his YouTube, man.
I watch his After Dark.
Yeah, man, he's really cool. Yeah,
he does a lot of good mixing videos. So
yes, he's great. His plugins are amazing, man. There's some of like the most like colorful plugins. Like he has all these little like these transformer plugins that are just like one's like a Neve, an API, a tube. They're like $25 and you can just throw them different places and just add like transformer saturation. But also there's this drum bus compressor called Silica. I would say that, but it's saturation and compression too as well. So kind of fits. It's kind of in an in-between area. But if you're looking for very colorful plugins, his stuff is amazing. Cush Audio can't sing the praises enough. If you're looking for colory plugins.
Yeah.
What's your reverb? What's your reverb?
Oh, yeah,
reverb. Reverb. Probably my Lexicon 224.
Hardware?
UAD.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a UAD fam.
Still.
Yeah, UAD, a big UAD. Yeah.
I'm on the bandwagon too. I love UAD stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I'd say my compressor, just to be basic, glue compressor in Ableton. I use that on everything, every project. EQ, I'd have to say Pro Q3. Although Soothe is a close competitor. Soothe too.
Soothe is great, man.
It's so good. And then I'd say delay, Echo for sure. I love Echo and everything. Or I'd say Echo Boy by Sound Toys if I had to go.
Echo Boy is great, man. Echo Boy sounds so good.
That's been in my back pocket for a long time. Saturator, Ableton Live Saturator. I've used Decapitator. I've used like the Oxford Inflator and like 6 billion other saturators. Ableton's still my personal favorite. Reverb, I would say Valhalla. Probably.
I love all the Valhalla stuff, man.
Yeah.
That's a great company, man. They make really cool stuff.
And it's cheap. It's like I can buy this and feel good about myself. And it's been a good day because it works on everything, Yeah. So that and hybrid reverb obviously is dope too. It's got that nice convolution and the algorithmic side too. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hey, you mentioned Soothe. Have you guys tried Gullfoss?
No, but I've heard good things.
My demo just ran out. I was messing with it a bit. It's interesting.
Man, it's pretty far out.
I was crazy skeptical because of the quantum something in the description.
It's real, man. It
does something. I still don't know if I'd buy it, but I could see maybe if I had a project with a budget, I could do it. Yeah, I might, but
yeah, man, it's pretty cool. It's also nice, man, because clarity is one of those mixed things that it's a really kind of like vague term, and there's lots of different ways to create clarity, and you can have the right frequency balance, but you may not have clarity in the mix, and that's what I find Gullfoss that actually does, which is like really hard to do without like getting in there and doing some like crazy stuff with the mix session, that you can actually create clarity with it. It's
definitely saved a lot of time in EQing. I could see the value of it being a huge time saver.
Give it a shot, man. If you haven't tried it, Dan, try it. Try the demo, man. It'll like put it on your master bus, and it's really cool because it's really complicated, but it's really just two knobs.
Yeah. I've heard good things. I have students who've been singing its praises to me the last year.
Yeah.
I just need to hit them up and be like, hey, how about that NFR maybe?
Actually, I think all the Ableton certified trainers need a Gullfoss NFR.
Yeah.
So we can sing its praises around.
Great idea. Yep. That's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
If you could get on that one for us, it'd be much appreciated.
Yes, please. I'll do my best. We'll see what happens. Ableton, if you're listening, post that in the Facebook for trainers. Okay. Well, we're running short on time, but I want to pick your brain on a couple quick questions. Maybe start with you, Brian. What is, I guess, knowing everything you know now with your mixing mastering experience, if you could travel back into time, what would you tell yourself?
Definitely learn how to use reference mixes and masters better sooner. And much more attention to monitoring and room acoustics and speaker placement and just like listening environment. I mean, especially for mastering, but for any of it, for mixing, is like, even when I thought I knew what I was doing and I was pretty good at producing stuff, I had this apartment where stuff was shoved in a corner, and all the mixes I was putting out, I thought they sounded great. And people were like, man, all I hear is bass. I'm like, what are you talking about? And like, I should have known better at that point, like in stuff I was doing.
Yeah.
And so like just paying much more attention to monitoring, checking things on a lot of different situations, and finding a room you really trust, that just like, you know, the room. And even if someone else might not make good decisions in there, you'd know like, oh, I can turn the bass down, even though it doesn't sound too loud. I know it is because this room is doing something. Or that kind of stuff, just references and monitoring and listening skills. All that, I'd say. I wish I would have focused more on that and less on some of the other things, which everyone does. I don't have the right EQ. I got to learn how to use this reverb trick better instead of how do I hear what I need to.
Yeah. And it looks like you have some nice foam behind you as far as acoustics go.
Yeah, this room is like kind of hopeless because of the shape of it. It's like I had to set up the short way instead of the long way. Yeah. But I have a bunch of stuff up. This is really good foam. It's
prime acoustic stuff, right?
Prime acoustic, yeah, it's prime acoustic, which is like it's pretty thick. It's really high end like foam. But I have a ton of stuff up in here. But it's still I've been in this place for over 2 years. The place I had before was set up much more with like movable stands, like panels, gobos, and that room I just knew it. So this one I can do stuff in. I'm trying to use like just some headphones more, but I'm learning the room. So I'm learning what I need to.
Yeah.
Have you tried your Sonar Works?
I just got the mic today.
You just got your mic?
I was one of the groups of people that they got lost.
I was too. I never got mine. Yeah.
I got mine like a month or two ago.
Well, some people got them like a year ago.
Really? Oh.
I'm stoked. I got my mic.
Yeah, it can help. It can help with some of the low end stuff, man. If you got like a lot of crazy low end stuff,
it's weird. This room's a mess. So
yeah. I love my sub pack for that reason, for dialing in any bass in a small room. Yeah, that's been a game changer for me, especially with side chaining.
Yeah, I used that for a while, man. I just moved to a new place, so I don't necessarily need it anymore. But yeah, the one thing that I found that's really cool about the sub pack is just also being able to mix like bass at super low levels.
Yeah,
like you can actually you can have your speakers down really quiet and still monitor bass, which is like pretty awesome. Usually you got to crank it.
The new Dynaudio LYD series, they're really good at that. They keep stuff consistent at different listening levels. So I got the 48s last year just so I had like speakers that were better at dealing with lower levels because of bad room acoustics. And it's a huge difference. I mean, I had some of the older Dynaudios, which I loved, but these have some DSP in them. They do some interesting things, and so I can mix it at a fairly low level and still have a decent sense of where the bass is, even though I don't feel it.
Yeah,
that's cool.
With these,
yeah. What about you, Mike? If you could time travel, what's some advice you would give yourself?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Brian said, I would definitely, acoustic. I mean, there was a point where I thought, I just can't mix, so I was like, I just can't mix, but it's just, I was mixing in terrible rooms, so, but yeah, that's the big one. The other thing too, learning the importance of like the whole frequency range, at least for me, there's been different like stages, like early on, like it seems like, I don't know, like for our first couple of years, I would forget about certain frequency ranges, in a lot of my mixes. It was like, from this year to year, I was just like really heavy in these frequency ranges. And then like another year, I was like really heavy in another set of frequency ranges. And it wasn't till like, later on that I really learned, like, it's really a mix of everything and understanding the balance and understanding like what each frequency range does and what it can add to the mix, and like understanding like what you're missing and what you need to add and all that stuff to create that clarity and balance, and on that side note is just to, would have told young me to chill the hell out on bass, because it's just it's just so easy to get drunk on bass in a mix. Just drink it. So a lot of there's a good solid few years of just learning how to like chill the hell out on bass.
Max bass on everything.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah. 20 years ago, that was the plugin. Waves max bass. Put on everything. Put on everything.
So yeah,
That's
just
hilarious.
chill out on bass.
Yeah, for me, one thing is just being able to trust my ears more than my eyes, because I feel like a lot of times it's easy with like, spectrum analyzers and like Pro Q3. It's easy just look for those little peaks and just keep pulling them down, and like a lot of visualization now with electronic music production. So for me, it's just continuing going back to being like, I have to take time where I close my eyes as I'm finishing off a mix and just really just kind of hone in and use my senses and just really feel what I'm getting. But also another thing I've been learning too is it's not to get lost in the sauce of playing with the same knob for like forever, where you just keep turning it. You're like, is this better? I don't know. Do I turn it on? I don't know.
Yeah.
And time is like, for me, the most valuable resource. So like if I can mix and master fast and I know what I'm doing and I feel good about it, like that's important. So for me, Corey Miller, he's a good friend of mine and he's worked with a lot of great artists. And one thing he always told me, or he said to me that really stuck with me, was just, if you play with it more than 3 times, just move on. You're in a good place. Like, don't just keep wiggling it. Like you're fine. Just move on. If you can't tell what's up or down after moving it a couple times, just move on. Like, and just kind of, so it sounds very small and very simple, but that's been helpful for me, like the last couple of years, especially.
Kind of on that note too, man, something else that I wish I would have learned to do earlier is like compensate for volume when you add plugins, monitor the levels the same, because you can add a compressor and it's louder, but is that really better?
Exactly.
So, that's something that I kind of wish I would have done a little bit more sooner too as well.
One of the first things I teach students that I'm teaching really how to use compressors is how to make sure that you match the inputs and the outputs.
Yeah.
that's like one of the like first day, here's a compressor. If you want to learn how to hear what this is doing, you have to know how to match the level of the input and the output.
Yeah.
So I probably wish I would have known that more earlier on too.
Same. Yeah, definitely the same. That's one thing I love about the makeup gain on the glue compressor is you can actually turn that into Saturator if you crank it up high enough.
On the soft clipping.
The soft clipping.
The soft clip button.
Yeah.
But I always find, man, like most compressors, the auto makeup is always like way too much.
Yes.
You guys feel the same way?
Yes, I feel the same way.
Yeah, I my save as default is like turn that off.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's always like way too much. It's like, what is going on? Yeah.
Yeah, makeup. I need auto makeup. I never use that.
Yeah.
Same. The only time I might use makeup gain is for like a podcast, for like spoken word, for somebody just talking.
I mean the auto makeup feature.
Yeah,
like
the auto make.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the only time I ever use it. This has been good. This has been great hanging with you guys. I want to respect your time. Sure. Let's see. Where's the best place for people to connect with you as far as staying in touch online or maybe learning from you?
For me, it's definitely through my website because there's links. I'm not super active on social media, but what I am, you can find all that from my website. Just formlabsnyc.com.
Okay. Formlabsnyc.com.
Yep.
Dope. Awesome. Are you on the gram or socials or?
I am, but I'm not. I haven't been active on that stuff. Other than like, I'm in a bunch of like audio and music nerd Facebook groups, but that's the only reason I've even on Facebook. I have a bunch of pages, but I don't do much. I have Twitter accounts I've had for years, but I post thing once a month. Same with Instagram. I'm old, man. I'm happy I'm up on all this social media stuff as much as I am.
I mean, I'm the same way. I am just recently kind of got into Instagram. I was telling you guys I got a camera to try to help with that stuff a little bit because I was like not social. I was like a social network cripple or something like that. I just did not do any of it. So, but yeah, you can find. I have a website, Mike Cupino, MikeCupino.com.
Can you spell that?
Mike MIKE and my last name CUPINO. .com, and also on Instagram. You can find me. I think Mike Cupino. There's not a whole lot of Cupinos in the world.
A lot of Brian Jacksons.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But you can find me there. I spell it also MYKIE, Mikey Cupino on Instagram. So
awesome.
Trying to be active a little bit on there, a little more engaged socially. So
Yeah, for sure. And everybody listening, as always, check out the links in the show notes for Mike and Brian. Stay connected with them, follow them. They're both wizards when it comes to mixing. This has been really dope. Thanks for hanging out, guys. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Awesome, guys. Yeah, it was fun, man. Talk to you guys
soon.
Later. Peace.
Yeah.
Bye. Hey, big thanks again to Brian and Mike for hanging out. Make sure you check out those links in the show notes. Give them a follow. Give them some love. Once again, if you want to purchase Ableton Live, the latest version, or you want to purchase some Ableton Live packs to expand your sound library, maybe you want to purchase a push, you can get 20% off anything on Ableton.com. So check that out. Go to Ableton.com, do some shopping, save some money. Use the discount code LPO20. That's LPO20. Also, don't forget to leave a review if you can, or subscribe, wherever you listen to the podcast. That would really help me out. I'd super appreciate it. And if you want to stay connected and updated with me and the latest episodes as they come and be the first to know when they come out, go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. liveproducersonline.com/newsletter. Thanks again to Ableton and the Certified Trainers for making this series possible. Stay tuned for the next podcast in the Certified Trainer series coming out on August 31st, which we'll be talking about production workflows, which is awesome. It's going to be a good one. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned for next Tuesday. Much love, everybody. I'll see you next time. Later.